everybody. Welcome back to another Barriers to Entry. Today we are doing Casting in Color. My name is Alexis Sims. I am the Associate Artistic Director of the Obsidian Theatre Festival, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. Ladies, shall we go alphabetically?
Yes. I'm Destiny Lilly. I'm the casting director, and my pronouns are she, her, hers.
I'm Erica Hart, and I am also a casting director, and my pronouns are also she, her, hers.
So before we kind of delve into casting in color and all of the different intricacies of that, ladies, can you just kind of give us a sense of like who you are and how did you get to this point in your careers and how did you decide on casting?
Hey y'all, I'm Destiny Lilly. Yes. How did I start this? Well, many years ago. I went to college. I studied theater. I went to Emory University in Atlanta. I studied theater and English literature. I was really interested in acting at first, but by the time I graduated from college, I knew that was not the thing I wanted to pursue in my life. I was like, not so much. And then started directing, and then I went to grad school and studied theater in England. I went to the Central School of Speech and Drama and moved to New York after that, thinking like, oh, I'm gonna like direct plays. And I got to New York and I directed plays and I got some directing fellowships and stuff. But I was like, how do you make a living directing plays? Which I still haven't answered, by the way. I don't really know the answer to that. But I was like, how do I do this? I don't know. And then through one of those fellowships at, it was like a residency actually at Ensemble Studio Theater, I had the opportunity to work with the casting director there who was casting their marathon of one-act plays at the time. And I was like, oh, hey, this is like, it's like directing because you get to work with actors and you get to like work on scenes and everything, but you also get to like see different people. And, you know, I really was like, oh, I really like casting a lot. And this seemed, little did I know, but it seemed like a more reasonable place to like carve out a career, or a place that like would, I don't know, that was where one could actually like make a living. I was so naive. But so then I got my first job in casting. I cast extras for like background extras for like 2 years. And that was great because I started to learn, like I got like all these like film contacts and like indie film people and music video people. And then kind of started freelancing doing that for a few years. And then, did lots of like indie films and stuff. And then for the last 3.5 years or so, I've been doing a lot of theater, going back to my roots in the theater, and recently doing some more like TV and film stuff. But yeah, it's like, I mean, casting's great. I really love it. It's something that I feel like I found something that I was like, oh yes, this was not what I set out to do when I started, but this is like where I was supposed to end up. And I really like what I do. And yeah, so I hope I've answered your question, Alexis.
I think you did. I have many questions that I was jotting down while you were talking.
Great. Yay.
I'm really glad that one of our barriers to entry is the working artist, which is all about how you sustain a creative career through entrepreneurship and like in a gig economy. So I'm glad that you brought that up, and stay tuned because we'll be getting to that next week, I believe. So thank you. Erica.
Yeah, so hey everybody, I'm Erica. I went to NYU for film and TV, and a couple of weeks in there, I went for directing, and a couple of weeks while I was there, I was like, I don't know if that's for me. And then I was like, well, I can be an editor because I like to edit. And then I thought about it and I was like, being in a room for 12 hours by myself, no windows, darkness, not for me either. But I have been editing a lot of self-tapes, so we're still editing. But then, you know, a couple of months into college, freshman year, film friend of mine, a classmate of mine, decided that she wanted to do a film outside of the curriculum, which was an interesting idea at the time and a very interesting idea looking back at it now. But she was very adamant on the fact that she was a director and this person was going to be the writer and this person was going to be the DP and this person's going to be the producer. And we printed out a crew list. And the second to last thing was casting director. And I have a dance background, and looking at it, I was like, well, I choreograph and I put people in my pieces, and that's what casting is is right. And so I cast the film, and that was, in October of 2008, and everybody else was trying to be the best director, the best writer, the best producer. And, because film school is so competitive, especially at NYU, and I was in the corner doing that thing. And everybody was like, oh, you did that thing for that film. Can you do that thing for my film? And so I had this monopoly going, and no one really saw me as a threat. And so I did that my freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year of college. And then I graduated and started freelancing at ABC Casting. And then 2014, I was promoted to full-time there as their coordinator. And then 2018, I left to work with Meredith Tucker Casting. And then while I was freelancing at ABC, when I started off, I was freelancing with other casting offices, but also still casting other stuff on the side, be it like Destiny Lilly commercials or music videos or things like that. And then in 2018, I left the studio and network side and got independent and worked with Meredith Tucker on a couple of things. And then this year, I guess I kind of branched out in casting a show for HBO Max. I'm working on a pilot for ABC now. So primarily film and TV. But then I dabble into commercials, sometimes theater with the National Black Theater and Drama League. So all around casting.
Wow, a lot.
It's a whole lot. It's a whole lot, but it's been fun.
Destiny, did you tell us what you're working on right now?
No, it's top secret.
Okay, got it.
Okay, just kidding. No, exactly, it's top secret. Yes. What am I working on right now? Everything. I mean, I still have. There are a number of I was doing a lot of theater before the pandemic started, and there's a number of projects that I hope see the light of day that we're just about to see the light of day. Like I just had been working on Nollywood Dreams by Jocelyn Bio at MCC Theater. That was going into its tech rehearsals basically. And when, no, they're going into a dress rehearsal actually when the pandemic started, but the plan is to have that show back up again soon. I was also working on To Kill a Mockingbird on Broadway and the national tour. And then now I have a couple a major feature film and a pilot, but I also have, I'm working on a show called Only Murders in the Building for Hulu. Which is a half-hour comedy series that will premiere at some point, and it'll be super exciting.
So both of you guys are doing amazing stuff in a pandemic.
In a whole panorama.
Mm-hmm.
In a whole Panera Bread.
A
whole Pandora bracelet. Yep.
It's been really amazing to see, especially what I feel like with Black creative people, how we have kept busy in this time and managed to thrive in this time in a way, which is going to bring us to something later on. But I actually was really taken by both of you kind of talking, and especially, Erica, what you were talking about was mostly film and TV. Mm-hmm. And what you were talking about, Destiny, was a lot of theater with some film and TV also. And so I'm curious did I say that right? You're like, no. Mostly
it's just in my mind, I did theater, and then theater didn't pay any money, and I needed to make some money, so I did film for 10 years, and then I came back to the theater. So I'm yes, but yeah.
So don't listen to what I said. Listen to what she said. Both of them.
I wandered in the wilderness for 10 years or so, 7 years. I wandered. Yeah. I just feel it's much less glamorous than it sounds.
Well, I am really curious. I feel like most things, when you really get into the work of them, it's work. You have to put in time and energy, but then you get the reward coming out on the other side. Before we transition to the next topic, I'm just curious about what you found the differences are between working in casting between theater and film, and what might be some things to keep in mind if you're an aspiring artist or an aspiring casting director, and you're trying to figure out maybe where you want to go?
I think one of the biggest things is, of course, the money. I think an actor can make what some actors on stage make in a week. Some of those actors in TV are making that in a day. And more than that, a co-star waiter number one for one day is possibly making more than a lead on a Broadway or an off-Broadway stage,
Really
off-Broadway?
Off-Broadway.
Off-Broadway.
Definitely. Like a one-line co-star than you make in a week for an off-Broadway show.
Yeah. So money is something interesting. But I think another big thing, and Destiny's jump in, is time, right? Especially for episodic TV, you might have a week if it's a comedy to cast, the whole episode, maybe 2 weeks if it's a drama. But for theater, you're on that baby for a while. So time and money are the two biggest differences. Some of the process is, different when you're booking people and things like that. But definitely time and money for me.
Yeah. And being in New York, like most actors here do both or do, are flexible to do a lot, or they do comedy, or they do like most actors in New York, I think, aren't just theater or just TV, or, they're flexible. They do different things. And so, you're pulling from a lot of the same talent pool for both because people are versatile in that way. But yeah, I mean, theater is just like, especially if you're doing like a Broadway show or even an off-Broadway show, sometimes those are in development for years and years, and you're working on it for years and years and years. Like casting, there are shows where I've cast like 6, 7 readings, workshops over and over, and and then finally you get to the point where you're doing a production where, as like Erica said, like once you're kind of in it with a film or a TV show and it's like you're going, then it's like, okay, next episode, or it's like, okay, we shot that day and we're like, we need to have this cast like tomorrow. But I do think that in terms of the acting, the most important thing is to be good, to really do your work that you would do for anything, as you would prepare for a theater audition and as you prepare for like a film or television audition. If you like are more of a theater actor and you're too broad or whatever, too big, they can scale it back, like that's what directors are for, but it's really about like your preparation and the level of preparation that you should put into it remain the same, from an acting side. And for me, the thing that I like about, I miss being in the room with people, like, I completely understand why, but I miss like that interaction because especially in theater, a lot of the time I would get to do a lot of pre-screens with actors. So we like bring them in without the director or the playwright at first and get to like work with them on the scene and get to like kind of, coach them a little bit so that when they did come in with the team, they were able to put their best foot forward, which just doesn't happen as much in this COVID world, even though sometimes we coach people on Zoom before their auditions. But I do think like for TV, it feels like a lot of it's kind of like the timelines are relatively fast. So we don't always have time to kind of do like pre-screens and prep people and stuff. But yeah, but I think from an acting perspective, it's really about just like putting in the work.
It's so interesting because every time the both of you talk, I'm furiously typing notes because I have so many follow-up questions. So it was really interesting. I'm going to start with Erica since you started it off. Just the money difference, because I know as an actor myself, it's something that I was made very aware of. And I was like, wow, I did one day and I made all this money. But then it's just the one day plus residuals. But still, it always seemed, at least from me, and that like theater seemed easier to get into in a way, like in the audition, like there was more of it. There was more opportunity there in various roles, whereas like TV and film felt more narrow. And that could just be my experience with it. Like when you book a TV or a film, then it's like, check, thank you. And then it was like a one-time check, maybe with a residual, depending on what you were doing, right? But then if I book a theater thing, and this is of course my logic, so I want to hear your thoughts about this. If I book something in theater, then I'm not maybe getting paid as much for the one day, but I have perhaps more of a consistency, particularly if I'm working like on a national tour or like a show or something like that.
Yeah.
To where the sum of the money may not weigh in the same way. But I'm curious about that piece for sure. And yeah, I'm just gonna start there. What are you all's thoughts on that?
Oh, sorry.
No, take it. I was actually gonna toss it to you.
I think if we're talking about barriers to entry, I think there are more barriers to entry to doing like professional film and television than there are to theater. Yes. And some of those are like joining the union based, but I think it's more like representation based, like having representation. I think it is, there are a lot of like really small theaters out there that like you can do a play at without necessarily being union if you haven't started yet. If you're interested in theater, they have EPA auditions, which are equity principal auditions, which are open calls that you can go to. If you're not equity, you can still go, and if they have time at the end, they'll see you. So that's like a lower, which there's not like a reciprocal thing that exists in film and television. Mm-hmm. So I do think that some of those barriers to entry are lower in theater, which makes it a little easier to get in the door. I also think that more in terms of if people are doing like a training program, like a school program specifically for acting for the theater, there are more of those than there necessarily are kind of like, like you're kind of like 4-year or 2 or 3 year programs in acting for film or acting for television. And I think that a lot of the time people are able to get like, they have a showcase and they're able to get like a meeting with an agent or a casting director or something out of having like that in theater specifically, because that's what they've studied. And it may be that they get signed for film or TV or commercials or whatever, but that's kind of like theater is like the conduit to that. I also think one of the best ways to get hired on television in New York is to be in an off-Broadway play, mm-hmm. because all of the casting people go to those, and especially if they're not familiar with you, they're like, who is this person? I must put them on my show. Like, you are guaranteed, like if there's like an off-Broadway play that like, especially one that's like pretty like successful or buzzy, you will see all those actors on the TV show in the next like 3 months. Mm-hmm. So I do think that like one can lead to the other, but there's also like, I used to work at the School of Visual Arts and do casting for student films. And I think it's really key that actors who are starting out and are looking to get work and are looking for like ways to kind of like get things going, like student films can be a really good way of doing that. Mm-hmm. That they're able to get footage from that, they're able to get experience. Usually there's like not a lot of pay. There's either like no pay or very little pay. So it's like not something you want to do forever. But if you're really trying to like just start and like learn what it's like to be on a set and learn what it's like to act on screen, that student films are a really good way to start that out.
I agree 1,000% with what Destiny said, all of what she said. And I think another thing to think about, again, is that time limit. I think when you're going in for a theater audition, in the back of their mind, it's like, okay, I still have rehearsal with this person. I still have tech with this person. I still like, you get to see this person over and over again. So you get multiple tries, if you go on this train with it, so that they can work with you and things like that. With film and with TV specifically, film a little bit, but with TV specifically, there's just no time, So when a lot of producers are watching your auditioning, they're envisioning you first day on set, right? So I think there is just a little bit more of like, that to also come into play. And like Destiny said, there is no EPA equivalent for film and TV, like that is an open audition for anyone who, just hopped off the bus and said, I want to be an actor. If you stand in line, regardless of if you have an equity card or not, they might see you if you're not equity at the end, if they have time. There's no that access to that. And that's why I always tell, actors to go to those EPAs if you think you're right for that role, because Destiny and I can name a lot of people who have been booked off of Broadway shows and then have led to other gigs, or if they haven't booked that show, that casting director still brings them in. So that idea of access is something else that TV and film just doesn't have in its structure.
So there's like lots of things, again, that you're saying, this and also this. So I'm just going to first. So you said something that I always have felt was very important, and both of you have kind of touched on it. This idea of even if you don't book the thing, that it's if you present yourself and if you go in prepared, then you're possibly open for something else that you didn't even know about. And the same thing in the off-Broadway play, right? Like, if you're in an off-Broadway play, you have no idea that you're basically auditioning in a performance for people who are coming to see you to potentially cast you in other things. So the interconnectedness of it all. And I was also just like kind of curious about, well, two things. So there's been the technique of acting for theater versus acting for the camera. And I feel like I've heard of more often people with not as much, like being cast in something for film or TV based off of just who they are. Whereas I feel like in theater, you are, because maybe it's 8 shows a week, there's a different process, and I could be totally off with that. So I'm curious your thoughts on that. And I'm also curious, you know, for people who maybe don't want to go all the way to New York, or they want to do things where they are and build the community there, suggestions about getting in with that, and especially because both of you come from markets outside of the city, New York City, and kind of navigating more like a regional circuit and a regional film and casting.
I mean, Alexis, I think a lot of it still applies. I mean, there are colleges in pretty much all of the cities that, you know, like all the sister cities that you told us about. You know, there are schools there if you're interested in doing student films. They have film programs there, and you can still get involved with those. There are theater companies in all those cities as well. So it's really about, you know, looking up what the local theater companies are, you know, like seeing if they have a lot of, especially in smaller cities, they might have open auditions of some sort, or, you know, like finding out what their process is, you know, or is it something where, you know, like sometimes you can be like, oh, I volunteered to be on the crew for this, and that's how I learned, you know, a little bit about backstage stuff, if you're interested in like learning other parts of theater as well, or the same thing for film. And I think that it really depends on the local market in terms of like your more professional film and television. Like there are places like Atlanta where there's tons of professional film and television shooting every day. And then there are other places where you don't have that as much. So if there's like, you know, if you're in like Atlanta or like New Orleans or a city like that, then yeah, maybe you start out like looking at the local background casting agency there, because usually there'll be like a specific, like a group that casts background specifically. And that's how you get like some experience on set. And then you start to kind of learn how that works. And then maybe you get like a couple lines here and there. And there are local casting. So for most of the shows that are like shot in a city like Atlanta or maybe Vancouver or New Orleans, they'll have a casting director who's usually in New York and or LA, and then also have a local casting person who's based in that area or that region. So then to, you know, reach out to them, send them your headshot so that they can start to like consider you for these like smaller roles, which typically, like if a show shoots in New Orleans, they might cast the big guest star out of New York or LA. But some of the smaller co-star roles, you know, the 1 and 2 and 3 lines will be cast out of New Orleans or out of the South in general, than people who can be local hires. So I think that there are a lot of opportunities. It's really, I always encourage people to use Google, because sometimes people ask questions, which I appreciate, but like many of those questions can be answered by Google. And you're like, oh, what are the theater companies in my area? And the best way to know that is to Google theater companies in, you know, Oakland was one of the cities, right? In Oakland, California. And, you know, you'll find a list and you can do some research, and that'll really jump off for you, your process, because every city is going to be a little different with its opportunities. But I think that wherever you are and however much you want to be in this business, like, I think it's definitely possible to make a living doing, you know, acting in a city like Oakland, but you're not going to have as many opportunities as if like LA or New York or even DC or Atlanta, you know, but it's still possible. So it's like you have to find what those resources are in that place. Or it might be something where you're starting your career there and you want to move on eventually and then go to like a bigger market.
Yeah, I just think there's, you know, more than one way to skin a cat. And we know actors who have never lived in New York or LA, but are booking and booking and booking and making a lot of money doing it, of playing the game. Like I'm in DC now. I was in New York, up until August of 2020. I'm in DC now. And some of my friends who are actors here have no thoughts of going up to New York. I mean, they were theater actors, but they made a great living and they were working actors in DC and Virginia and Maryland. And, if you might not have a big theater scene, but there are films that always shoot there, or if it's not that, there are commercials that shoot there. Or if it's not that, there are local commercials, like it might not be national, but there's always, a car dealership commercial, or there's always a community center, or there's always things that you can do as actors, regardless of where you are, that you can work on your craft. And you could possibly be the big fish in a small pond and realize, you know what, I think it's like Destiny said, you might be in Oakland, not necessarily near maybe a San Francisco or LA, but you're like, you know what, I'm ready to move down there. I'm ready to move down to LA. And you just needed a little bit of time to get there. But yeah, that's the beauty and the beast of this business, I think, is that there's really no manual on how to do it. It's just very much of what you make it, and your journey is your journey. And I think what you were saying at the top about, how you might go into a room and not book the job. I always say, you could have 52 auditions, right, in a year. And that's, one audition a week. And in that, you might not book those 52 jobs. But if you look back on your auditions, how many times did you go in for that project, right? How many times did you go in for that casting director? Right? What did you get through that? Were you pinned? Were you on hold? Did you get a call back? All of those things, even getting into an office that you haven't gone in for, is a win in my book. Because, for that one waiter number one role, we get about 1,000 submissions. We're not going to see 1,000 people. We're going to see maybe 20, right? So that's 20 people that we selected out of 1,000. Just from the bat, and I always say that you have to take these victories because they're very, very important, and just see, track it. I know people who have an audition book and they write down, this date I went in for this one, this date I was there. If you want to keep that tracking just to see your progress, I think that is an interesting and possibly a good idea.
Yeah. And I think it's important that actors know that, if you're doing good work, it is getting noticed. It might take a while. Mm-hmm. You might not see the fruits of it. But, I saw last year when theater was happening, so I guess 2019, 2020, I was a voter for the Lortel Awards. I saw over 100 off-Broadway plays. I kept my notes, and there are actors from that I'm like, okay, now let me see if they're available for this TV thing or this thing. Mm-hmm. Because yeah, and we didn't even have an interaction. They didn't meet me. I just saw the show, but I keep notes. And I have a sticky, not a Post-it, but a Mac sticky that's very long on my desk, on my desktop, on my computer. That's my God, a cast list. And it's everybody from Viola Davis to someone I saw in an off-Broadway show 8 years ago. It's all these kinds of people. And every time I'm making a list, I was oh, anybody on my God, a cast list who'd be right for this? Oh yeah, great. This person's amazing. Just to people who have stood out to me at some point over the last 10 years, that I'm just yep, that person's great. I want to make sure that I don't forget about them when I'm, when I'm casting things, because that person's great. And they don't even it's I saw them in a show or in a movie or in something they don't know. You don't know who's rooting for you.
Yes.
There are so many people who are rooting for you and you don't even know. There are people who in my mind, we know each other and I'm we have never met. Right? But I'm oh, I love this actor. Yep, put them on all the lists that they're right for, It's yeah, getting their self-tape. Oh, what a great self-tape, And they may not get it, and they may not have ever interacted with me in that process, so they don't know that I'm a huge fan. But I'm to me, I'm yep, we're gonna get the next one. It's all good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we all talk to each other, right? So it's if I have a specific project that I know that Rory Bergman's office casts the Americans, and that's a lot of Russians, right? And so if I'm casting a Russian project, one of the first people I'm going to go to would be my friend Rory Bergman and Dana Katz and Carly Famelot. Those are the first people that I'm going to go to. We all talk, we all help each other, And that's another thing, is if Destiny sees a play and I go to Destiny, I'm like, oh, how's that play? And she's like, oh, have you seen so-and-so yet? Like, they're amazing. Like, that's what we do. That's a part of the job. A huge part of the job, like Destiny said, is memory, organization, and just like networking and talking to other casting directors. And because there are only 24 hours in a day, right? We can't see everything, but we're all seeing everything. And so having those little kikis and just talking about actors is very beneficial for us.
Yeah, and it also works the other way, because if there's an actor,
well, that's true.
I don't really know them, and I'm like, hey, oh, I see they're on this show. Oh, Erica cast this show. Okay, great. Let me like text Erica and see if she has something to say about this actor. And if she's like, well, I heard that on set they were late every day, or something like that. It's like,
Yeah.
we do it. It works the other way. It works for you. But
Yeah.
if you aren't professional and doing your thing, then it works against you, because we do, talk to each other in that way too, because, it's our job to like do a good job and to bring in like an actor who's going to do a good job. So if we hear that you were like late all the time or something like unprofessional, then that's also gonna be difficult for you.
Beauty and the Beast, guys. Beauty and the Beast.
I feel like that's also something that's really important that not everybody knows, is how important the little things are. Like being early is being on time.
And I think what people forget, like when I was younger, like my dad is a lawyer, but he also does films. He's an entertainment lawyer, so he's in there. And he would always try to hound me about the business. He's like, Erica, it's a business. And I'm like, no, but the craft, like the acting and like, the arts and like blah, 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 and like dance and like, no, yeah, the business, that's not my. But then you like grow up and it's all about the business, And I think a lot of actors forget the professionalism of it sometimes, like being on time or coming prepared or, reading just a little bit of the script. Like you said, little things go a long way and they add up. But the moment you're unprofessional, that spreads like wildfire, right? And just the like things that you don't think people are watching, or don't think that people are, it's like, oh, I'm 5 minutes late, but you don't know what that 5 minutes late is, right? We might be in like Pearl or Ripley Greer or something and have a hard out, like a 10 to 6 moment. And you're like, oh, well, it's only 6:05. It's like, well, I've left because I had to leave, So just think like little things like that you might just take it like for granted, be it time or anything, is something to think about.
Yeah. And we do like, yes, believe me, I've been on the subway where it's late and there's some drama and, and you're like, oh, I wanted to be on time. And now, and it's like, you're like cursing, So like, yeah, in this atmosphere, it's like you're getting on the Zoom and you got technical issues, your internet shuts down and there's, yes, it's more about your habits. It's more about practice. Yes, everybody messes up and is late once or twice or something happens or you get on. Yeah, like it's not about us being like, oh, you were late once and I will never see you again. It's not that. It's more like the kind of track record that you set. And also it's about the way because I had an actor show up once who was like maybe 45 minutes late for a callback and was pretty nonchalant about it. And I was kind of like, you're 4 minutes late, right? Like, because this is like when it was like in person. So I was like, we had to like move to a different room because we got kicked out of the room that we were in because we'd gone over you were the last one. And then like, it's one thing to be like, our appointment ran long. I'm so sorry. If you could just give me 2 minutes to like, get myself together. I'm really excited to be here. That's one thing. But it was really like, oh, hey, what's up? Yeah, okay. You ready for me? Those are my feelings on that.
Yeah. We're all human. We all make mistakes, but like Destiny said, habits are habits. So definitely watch out for those.
And I know, like for me, time. Whoever is watching, time is not a strength of mine. Like, I know for myself. That's why I'm saying it also to all of you out there. Like, it matters. Like, it matters because you don't know if you get there right on time, you have to maybe sign in. And then there's something else that you have to do. And so then by the time that you've done all those things, then it's past the time that you were supposed to go in. So it's just like keeping in mind like all of those unforeseens. And I mean, these ladies are wonderful, but how amazing is it that I get to talk to them, because they're human too, and they want to be respected too. Like, they want their time and their emotional energy to be respected and valued in the same way that they're respecting ours when we walk into the room as actors. Which leads me to, can you ladies walk through a casting process for us? What does casting, and I mean, you can divvy it up, film, theater, I don't know how different they are, or if they are different.
Yeah, so I'll talk about the TV a little bit, and film pretty much the same, but you get the job. You get the job, and then you get the script, and you hopefully have a talk with either, if it's a TV, your showrunner, or if it's a film, your director, or your producer, or your writer. You have a talk with somebody just so that you can start on some sort of page, maybe not the same page, because the pages change as the casting process goes, but just to have some sort of outline, maybe some prototypes, maybe some people that they want to offer it to. You just have that, so that in the back of your mind, you know where to go. And I always tell filmmakers that I talk to, be specific but have an open mind. You wrote what you wrote, so you know exactly what that is, but sometimes things change. And sometimes, the role that you said must be 5'7", because my mother was 5'7", I might bring in someone who's 5'2" that would kill it, So you just never know what's going to come through that door. But that's another conversation. After you hopefully have a call, which is usually called like a concept call, because you're trying to figure out what the concepts of everything is, you would go through the script, and, you would write down all the characters, write the descriptions, do that, and then send it to the creatives so that they can approve. And sometimes the creatives will write that breakdown. It depends on what type of project it is. But sometimes the creative will write that, or sometimes the casting director would. But you would send it to the creatives first to get that approved. And then you would send that to the studio and network to approve, because they have to approve it before it goes out. So after everything is approved, you put it out, and then agents, managers, and actors, depending on the project, submit. And you get submissions, and you go through the submissions, and you see all the actors that are great for it, or actors who you're like, oh, I never thought of that person for this. Maybe, you go through it, and, it takes time, a couple of days sometimes, or if you're on a time crunch, you stay up all night. I'm not speaking from, recent. But no, I don't know what that is. You stay up all night, and you go through the submissions, and then you put out the appointments. Yeah. And then that's when you guys get the appointments, right? You get the sides, which are part of the script that you will be auditioning for. And then we bring you in, and you all do a great job. And then at the end of the day, we'll go through everyone we saw that day, or maybe, depending on the office, some offices send links every night. Some offices send links, every other night, or things like that. We'll go through the people, and then we'll select, okay, I like this person, definitely. Maybe let's hold till tomorrow with this person. And you'll go through the people that you saw, and again, I'm in the mind of before COVID. So I'm talking about people coming in and whatever. But you go through your thing, and then you send it off to creatives. And then the creatives hopefully like people that you sent, or maybe they realize something from the reads. Because again, like I tell actors all the time, when they're like, well, what do they want? What do they want? Casting is kind of the first time them hearing their words, right? They might have some friends read it or things like that, but it's their first time hearing those words. So there's a lot of stuff that is uncovered through these auditions. And so they might realize, oh, that 20-year-old ingenue that I wanted you to find, maybe now that's a 50-year-old man. I think something's not working. I think that's honestly, like, that happens all the time. And that's what auditions happen. Like, that's why auditions are great. So they can show them. So then hopefully they pick someone, and then we take their choice and we send it up to studio and network for approval. And then we contact either you, if you self-submitted, or your agent and manager with that offer. And then see you on set.
Yeah. I think you covered, yes, I think that covered a lot of things. I would just pick a couple of things to point out that Erica said that were extremely brilliant. One is the idea. It's like, oh, what are they looking for? And I'm always like, what do you have to bring? Because a lot of the time I think actors try to be like, oh, I need to just figure out what they want. I need to get in their heads and figure out what they want. and do that. And I'm like, what I want is for you to bring what you have to bring. That's what I want. Because being like, oh, okay. Or sometimes they'll be like, oh, my friend got called in for this too, and she's a different type than me. So that's what they really want. They really want, or like, you know, or it's like, oh, well, it says all ethnicities, and my friend who's Asian got called in, and I'm Black and I also got called in, but they're really not looking for me because they called in, like people, like actors will like themselves out and think, oh, that's like, I have to do this other thing, or I need to be more like that. It's like, you bring what you bring. You read it and bring the you to it, because honestly, we could hear like people give the same kind of like, okay, this is like the expected read over and over again. And we're not looking for the expected read. You know, it's like, we're looking for actors to make choices. We're looking for actors to bring themselves to it, whatever that is, their skills, their perspective, their point of view. I think that is something we're really looking for. So it's like, oh, what are you looking for? It's like, I'm looking for you. I'm looking for you. So not for you to like try to be like somebody else, or try to be like, oh, okay, they want like a nerdy Brad Pitt. Okay, let me do nerdy Brad Pitt. It's like, just bring you to it. Because a lot of the time, especially I've found very recently working in more television, but like I've found that like a lot of the characters that are like guest stars and co-stars, they're more sketches than they are like full drawings, you know? So like they're looking for you to fill in the rest of the lines, and like fill in, not like literally like lines that are written, but like, I'm not saying ad lib the whole thing. I'm saying they're looking for you to really like fill in who that character is more, because sometimes they're like not as fully fleshed out, especially like this might be an earlier version of the script and they just wrote it like a day ago, and that character might not be fully fleshed out. What do you bring to it that then the writers are like, oh, I just thought of this role differently. Hearing this person say the words, I'd like, oh, this, you know. But if you kind of give like the expected read, where you're just like, oh, okay, this must be what they want, because this is kind of like the first cursory thought that comes to your head, and not to make choices. I think sometimes actors are afraid to make choices because they think that will lose them the role. But the fact is, like, if I see like another 10 tapes that are exactly the same, like, I'm just like, yawn. Like, what separates you from the people who do the exact same thing? Like, nothing. So do something different.
Right.
And yes, and the only things I would like pick up on is that like in theater, we're usually looking at on a longer timeline. So like, you know, sometimes we're working on plays for years, which is cool. When they finally happen, you're like, oh, remember this play? And you go through and you're like, remember these people that used to be in this cast when we did the first reading that are now like 10 years too old for the part because we've been working on it for so long, you know? And one thing that you have to do on the TV side is that like we, the casting directors, will negotiate the deal. We'll negotiate like how much you're making. Whereas in theater, at least typically there's like a general manager or someone from the theater company who does that, in my experience. So it's just like, also there's no money. So usually you're going to get the same as everybody. It's a lot of like favored nations in theater, but not always, but usually that's like up to someone else. So it's like, great, we've got the person, we hand it off to a general management company that then negotiates the points of their deal, like how much they're making, what kind of dressing room they get, like those kinds of things are negotiated by someone else. Whereas in TV, oftentimes you have to negotiate a lot of these points yourself, if it's not a series regular.
I feel like one of the things that both of you stressed, that when I was younger, like it took me a very long time to really grasp, but this idea that you really are looking for, the casting really is looking for you. Like casting really does want you to be amazing, because then it's cast. And then
right.
And that there's no one way to be.
No. I think it's like a, you know, we could see, like, especially for the series regulars, we're seeing, you know, depending on what it is, we could see up to like thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And at the end of the day, it's only going to be one person that gets it, you know? And so I think if I see thousands and thousands of people, I should see literally 1,000 different ways to say it. Because we're on this call, we're 3 Black women on this call, but we're 3 different women, you know, coming from 3 different places and 3 different backgrounds, 3 different sets of parents, and et cetera, like that, all of yourness, regardless of if you've been on this world for 60 years or 60 years, that ness of all of it has to come in the room. And I think what Destiny was saying about your choices are your opinions, which is your point of view. So I need to see that choice, that opinion, that point of view on every single word, every single sentence, every single phrase, every single scene, every single page, like everything. You can't have something go past without not putting your stamp. And that's what they're looking for, like exactly what Destiny said. They're looking for your I always say, I'm looking for your personal best on that day, at that time, at that minute, at that second. Yeah, because that's what is going to push through, and that's what's going to book you the job, is being true to who you are, especially for TV, because TV is a personality game. You know, it's an evolving personality game that goes on for years and years and years. Like, look at SVU. That's 22 years of shows, you know, that the writers have to keep writing, right? And people have to be excited to watch you. And so to be excited to watch you is to be a living, breathing human being. I was casting a show a couple of months ago, and I was close to an actress who sent in a tape, and I was like, this is just a caricature. And I contacted her and I was like, I need you to redo this tape again. And she was like, why? I was like, I need to see you. I don't know who I'm seeing. She was like, yeah, I was being Regina Hall in Scream, in Scary Movie. And I was like, yeah, I want to see you. I don't want to see Regina. I've seen Regina. I haven't seen you, right? And so, yeah, we love Regina Hall. We love it, and I love this actress too. And so I just needed to see her, because regardless if you change your name to someone, change your hair, go to the same school as that person, like you can do everything, like get plastic surgery to look like that person. You're never going to be that person, right? It's just not going to happen. So you might as well just be you and do your work. Because that's enough. That's enough.
Can I put you on blast for a minute, Erica?
Oh, God.
So I was in a class one time with Erica, and it was amazing. Get a chance to take class with either of these women. It's amazing. But what struck me about what you're saying right now and what's happening in class is I'm remembering there was a specific gentleman, and when he was talking, he was so funny and like charming and relaxed, and then he got into the scene and he was not that at all. And I remember Erica was working with him and she was like just be you. Like you're so, I don't even know what you said, but basically you don't have to drop who you are to do the scene. And that it's just echoing what both of you are saying. Like bring you to whatever you're doing, instead of trying to put whatever you're doing onto who you think they are, or even on who you are. It's like finding yourself. I feel like Meryl Streep said something like that.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
I hear she's pretty good at acting.
Yeah, something. You know, she does a little thing here and there. It's fine.
She's an up-and-comer.
She's an up-and-comer. She's SAG bus join.
Can we shift really quickly? I'm just curious for all of the people out there. There's been, I don't know if you all out there have heard of colorblind casting or color conscious casting. And it's something that's evolved, at least, but I'm not on the casting side. So it's like from what I'm seeing on breakdowns, it's changing over time, as is what people are looking for. So do you mind just kind of defining for us and differentiating those two things?
I'll start. I mean, colorblind casting, I don't really think is like a thing, really, for me personally. I think that's like a term from kind of the 90s when people are like, oh, we can cast Black people in Shakespeare. Like, I feel like that's what that is to me. You know,
like Cinderella, like Brandy Cinderella, like
yeah, that was like a new thing. Like it was still like relative. Like, yeah, we could put like, you know, some Black people in a period piece or yeah, like that was more. I think that's more of like that kind of era term. I think that in general there are all these different types of projects, and some projects are very specifically written like about race, or it's very specifically written for people of a certain race and background. And those projects, it is important that we fill those roles with people who represent those backgrounds. other projects I think are kind of written kind of non-specifically, or they're still in like an early stage. And so it's like, why can't we see all different types of people for this? Why can't we, bring people together of different types? And then there's like a third thing, which is like, I guess kind of where you're going more with color conscious casting, where it's like, we're specifically going to cast this piece in like Regency, England, and put some Black folks in it because we want to, even though it's not like historical, it's like, but we're going to do it and it's going to be awesome and you're going to love it, So I think that there's all these different ways of looking at it. But the idea that one is supposed to kind of like, I'm going to turn off my eyes, then I don't see color, I don't think it's like, because for me, like, when I'm watching something, like I see the fullness of everybody up there. So like, I'm going to see, your color, your age, I'm going to hear your voice. You're going to bring you to it. Right. And the idea that you're kind of supposed to be like, oh, we're all going to kind of homogenize ourselves into like one colorless world, to me is like not super interesting. Right. But I think it's important that people are able to, because also I feel like that's like asking actors to try to remove like parts of who they are. And I don't want actors to feel like, oh, I have to like cover up this part of myself. I think it's much more exciting to be like, yes, we want you to bring the fullness of yourself to this, Yeah, I think it's like, unless something is very specifically written for people of like one specific race or another, then I'm just like, oh, so this is open. Great. It could be anybody. Mm-hmm. Let's like see these people. That sounds awesome. And let's like, and then if it's not open, like if it's very specific, then I'm like, well, then we need to make sure that this is like right. Because sometimes I feel like people are like, then let's make this character Black, but then they don't do anything to like the writing of that or the perspective of that character. It was just kind of like general, and now it's a Black person, but like they haven't actually done the work to invest in like, how does this person's like experience in, like in, let's say it's just like set today, like modern America, how is that shaped by their Blackness? Because like Black people walk through the world in a different way than white people, than Asian people, than all sorts of, there's different experiences. So that I'm not a huge fan of, when it's like, you can kind of feel like, oh, they just like kind of wrote this thinking the person was white, cast like a Black person or an Asian person, but didn't do anything to bring authenticity to that. I'm not personally, that's like not my thing, but because I think that you have to like then bring the role, because then it feels like tokenism as opposed to real inclusion and investment. It's just like, oh, we didn't want to get yelled at, so we cast like a couple of like people of color in these roles, but we didn't do anything to like understand the perspectives and how the role changes with a person of color in that role.
And I think for me, the thing that always rubbed me the wrong way was when it was like, so this role needs to be diverse. And it's like,
don't get me started on diverse.
It's
not be diverse.
It's like, okay, like wait, diverse. And it's like, okay, and it's usually the best friend, or it's usually the sister-in-law, or it's like that sort of thing. And I'm just like, so you're just gonna put everybody that's of color in one bin and just make this one role the color role, So that's always rubbed me the wrong way. But like if you take a show like Friends or even Sex and the City, like that could have been like, there was no need for any of that to be all white. Like that was very like 4 women in New York City, or 6 people in New York City, or 7 people in, I've seen like maybe 2 episodes of Friends. All these people in New York City and, an apartment building. There's no reason why those people couldn't have just been everything, especially New York City. Okay. So that's just my 2 pennies of what I'm thinking. I don't know if I added anything, because Destiny said it so eloquently and she hit all the points, but.
Both of you guys are adding a ton. And it's interesting to hear y'all's framework. It like brought up a lot of feelings for me talking about it. But just this idea of like intentionally casting someone because for the purpose of exploring their experience in that narrative. That's like, to me, that's always how I interpreted color conscious casting. It's like we're seeing everybody, And then it's like, this could be interesting for this, and this reason, because what can this show us that's new in the piece? What can this show us? What can this reveal? Like what insights can be gleaned. And when you both were talking, I was wondering if there are pieces that you read that have that have like a race and ethnicity specified on the character, but where when it's read, it doesn't necessarily have to be the one that's designated. And then how does that work? And then also, speaking of Friends and Sex and the City, like thinking about those shows versus now with, the recent social moment that we're having, how things have shifted and how you're seeing the casting practices and landscape change. Because I feel like what you were saying, Erica, is something that they didn't even think about.
Right. Like,
or Destiny's like, I don't know.
I think that's letting those people off the hook.
But I do think that like a show like Friends would not be by network standards would not be greenlit today unless somebody was of something.
Yes.
Like a show will not go on air like that anymore.
Yeah.
The politics of Friends, of like literally living single and all that stuff, like that's a totally different discussion. But that is a huge leap because there was an article that went out and, executives got, slapped on the wrist and slapped on the butt and all this stuff. And it was like, okay, we as networks, these major networks on television cannot allow this to happen, and I think that's then the beauty and the beast of it is you get into this tokenism thing of, like I was saying, where it's just like you're watching these shows, be it on network or not, you're watching these shows and you're like, why is the Black role the same role? Why is the Asian role the same role? Why is the Latin role the same? Like you see these these stereotypes and these archetypes, and it's just like, well, we got to fill it. Like we're not going to go on air unless we have this one thing, Yeah. So it's like, yes, we have evolved, but we still like in the evolution, there is more that needs to evolve into. Yeah. And that just becomes, authenticity and having people behind the camera or, behind the stage doing the work and allowing them to do the work.
Yeah, it can be hard to push back against some of those like preconceived notions of like who goes where. Because like even in projects we're casting, like we don't make the ultimate decision. And there are times that we're like, hey, like these people are great. And it's still like, yeah, but for the main focus person, I think we should, like it's still like, yes, as like there's kind of like a kind of sidekick mentality or like, oh, but like, or like, the idea that a quote like mainstream audience won't get it unless the like point of view character is white or is male or is cisgender or is, insert, kind of more like heteronormative thing here, So I do think that there's still a lot of work on that because while I do feel like, yes, when I was like growing up, I didn't see like the same kind of like real diversity on screen. There were kind of like these fantastic, like Erica was saying, like Living Single and these like shows that were like Black shows. And then there were like basically like white shows, but they didn't call them that because they were just called shows, which is part of like white supremacy. But like, like there were like shows that were like mostly white shows where there'd be like one Black friend occasionally or something. That was kind of the idea of like the quote mainstream. And now the mainstream is more like, oh yes, there's a white guy and he has an Asian friend and a Black friend, and you're still like, okay, happy for people who have those jobs. Would love to have like more kind of point of view characters who came from different backgrounds. And it's not just about race, it's also like socioeconomic background. You don't see as many characters that come from specifically like other than kind of middle class or like upper middle class, like socioeconomic backgrounds on a lot of shows, or it's like about like, being on the streets. Like it's like one or the other.
Right. Right.
So, and that's like what it's about. It's not just like, oh, this is a person and they live a life and that is a part of who they are. It becomes like about that thing as opposed to like this being part of who that character is. I think there's all sorts of, and I think like actors sometimes feel like they have to hide that part of themselves because, you know, oh, well, they're not seeing the person on TV who reflects that, unless they're like a certain type of character that they don't necessarily want to play.
And also, I think it's something that, like, if you feel like there isn't work out there that resonates with you, or that speaks to your experience, or that deals with what you deal with on the regular, then you can create that.
Yes.
You can write it, you can film it, you can put it on stage, you can start small. It could be interactive. There's a lot of different ways to express, and everything has its pros and cons, right? So, like,
Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah, like what both of the ladies are talking about, you know, when you're talking network, there's a lot of different eyes on that, and a lot of different levels to people who are making the decisions.
Mm-hmm.
If you're starting something more from the ground, then you have more artistic control. You have to work for different Beauty and the Beast.
Mm-hmm.
So don't be discouraged. Just figure out kind of how you want to tackle it, and then understand that no matter what avenue you go into, there are going to be obstacles and triumphs that you're going to experience. So we're going to like wrap it up because you guys have given me so much of your time. So, word of advice to give to aspiring creatives: your greatest obstacle and your greatest triumph. I guess you should invert these. So let's start again. If someone wanted to get into casting, how would you suggest? Like, what would you suggest? Your greatest obstacle, your greatest triumph, and then a word of advice to aspiring creatives. Erica's looking at me like, how dare you?
No.
And I'm going to toss it to Erica. How to get into casting? Yes. I would have answered this question differently probably like a year or two ago. But I think one of the things that Erica and I and a lot of other people have been working on over the last year is to really try to remove some of those barriers to entry to the field of casting, because they are quite high typically, you know, usually involving like unpaid internships and, you know, like relatively long periods of like making like little to no money. And oftentimes those positions but oftentimes like those positions would be offered to people who knew people. Like it's very like, or they weren't like advertised. A lot of casting jobs in general aren't really advertised. It's more word of mouth, and all of those like parts, you know, when people are like, I'm looking for an assistant, but it's like they're talking to the people who are already working in casting and not necessarily casting a wide net. So yes, all of those things are true. I would say one of the things is Erica and I are both members of CSA, which is the Casting Society of America. And CSA started last year a mentorship program for like both like aspiring casting professionals, people who are working as assistants and associates, to like connect them with a mentor who can help them kind of, you know, get to the next, wherever they're at, to get to the next level. And you know, through that, I know that we both had two mentees. We both mentored two people, and like I feel like that was like a very helpful way. Like I've heard from other people, like my mentee, one of them got a job. I was so proud.
Come on.
He got a job like 3 weeks into the mentorship though. So that was like great, because all I did was like help you rewrite your resume. So this is just your skills. But then we were able to like really walk through things with her, and she was like, oh, I'm having trouble with like Caster, which is like a casting software. It's, you know, like little things like that. Like, you know, I was able to like help her. But like, you know, like I really think like those things are that something that we're trying to do in casting actively is to remove some of those barriers, because typically it's like, oh, well, you have to have interned, and if you didn't, and you have to intern while you're in college, because like they only accept college interns, because you can't have interns who are like out of college, you know. And the internships are unpaid, and they're usually in New York or LA, and you have to make your own way. Like there's all these like barriers just to getting your foot in the door. And it's also a very hard career to like transfer. Like, you know, there are people who have like, oh, I've been an actor or a director or, you know, these other things. But it's kind of like, oh, the idea was like, oh, you have to kind of have interned and gone to, and it's harder to do like a kind of mid-career transition. But that's something that we're actively working on as well, because there's so many smart and talented people that would be really great in casting. But because of the kind of like apprenticeship system that's existed, haven't had the opportunities. So now we're really working to dismantle that system as much as we can and like open things up rather than just, just through word of mouth, make sure like jobs are posted so that people like who we don't know can see them, because then it just becomes like like an internal, only the people we know are finding out about opportunities to begin with. So that's a big part of that.
You said it's CSA. I'm sorry.
CSA, yes, the Casting Society of America. So like a lot of like if you were paying attention to anything that we cast, it'll say like Destiny Lilly, CSA, yep. Or like Erica. Erica, are you billed as Erica A. Hart?
I am. Yeah, I'm annoying.
Yeah. Well, it's gonna be like Erica A. Hart, CSA. Which is the Casting Society of America, which, we're both also, we both serve on different boards of the organization, but both are part of the like board and steering committee of the organization as well. So, which I think is one of the things, but I also think like you want to start casting, like go to your local theater or like local film production company or whatever and be like, hey, I'd love to work with you guys, learn as much as you can about actors, especially in this time, all we got to do is like stream some TV, right? So watch the shows, pay attention to the actors, write them down. I have like a system, like I have like a little database. Like I put actors' pictures in, I write notes about them, like, but everybody has their own system of how they know actors. But like, you want to come in with that knowledge, but you want to have something. What is something you could do on your own, even if you aren't working in casting? It's to like watch stuff and know actors. I also tell people to get like alerts for like either like Deadline or Variety and stuff and read the industry news, because knowing what's going on also is super helpful. Like I'm always in meetings and like, I remember being in a meeting with this like artistic director of a theater, and she said something about an actor and I kind of like made a face and she was like, what? And I was like, yeah, he just got announced for this, for like the next, like, it was like a huge thing. I was like, he's not going to be available. It was like, he's not available, like he just did, I forget what it was, but it was like, he'd just been announced for like, Game of Thrones or something, like something huge that was like, or no, I remember what it was. It was like the next Star Wars thing. So I was like, not available, right? Super busy. But kind of like, knowing what's going on in the business is really helpful. And also reading kind of like who those players are, what are the companies that are like releasing films? What are the companies that are like producing television and theater? Paying attention to that, I think is key for theater. I think, because Variety and Deadline does tend to be more film and television. For theater, I would say if you read like Playbill or read like the Broadway Briefing, which is like an email that you can get every day that kind of has a rundown of kind of that day's Broadway news, is good. Yeah, but like the thing you can always work on yourself is your knowledge, so that when you're in the position that you're casting people, who people are and you have that familiarity. That's not a thing that you need to necessarily be in a job to learn. The software that you have to, like the different websites and like stuff like that, you can learn. Like, most people have the ability to learn those, but having that knowledge and having taste, like really understanding your aesthetic and like what you like about actors and why, and being able to talk about it, that's something you can practice on your own.
I think there's really nothing, like she covered it. Like the only thing that I will say that I will highlight is what Destiny, everything, like take your highlighter out and like highlight everything that Destiny just said, because that's it. Like literally that's it. The only thing that I will say is what I've been telling people lately. This time is the time of the reflection and the time of thinking about like how you got here in your past and things like that. And what I've been telling budding casting professionals is what Destiny kind of said about like, even you could be a casting intern, or you could be a casting assistant, or you could be just applying for casting jobs, but always find a way to be a casting director. So I was lucky enough, to be a casting intern, but I was still being technically a casting director of those student films. Even when I was an assistant, I was still a casting director for independent projects, short films, and things like that. There's something that you learn when you are the person that you want to be one day, even if it's on a slowish scale. Even it's like, well, my friend, is doing a reading. Maybe I can cast that. Yes, cast that. because then you get these tools and that you will be possibly ready sooner when that call comes. So always try to find ways and they might not pay you, but at least you have that skill and at least you have that knowledge of being that casting director and developing your taste, because that's what casting is. That's what casting is all about your taste and your actors' taste and, actors that you like, because there are actors that Destiny might like that I might not like, and there are actors that I might like that Destiny might not like, because this whole business is subjective, right? I say you could have a whole table full of producers and it's like a dinner table. You have one producer who likes chicken, you have one producer who likes steak, you have one producer who's a vegan, and then you have another producer who wants to tell me that the grass is green. You just never know what's going to happen, so it's all about opinion. So that's why Destiny, I think it's so great that you said to start watching things now. And we talked about Meryl Streep. Yeah, of course know who Meryl Streep is, of course know who Viola Davis is, of course know who Brad Pitt is, but who's playing their mom? Who's playing their babysitter? Who's playing their kid? Who's playing their kid's friend? Who's playing their kid's mom? Like knowing those actors, I usually call them like casting celebrities, people that, are on stage 8 shows a week that, could walk around freely, but are working actors who are making the money and doing the thing that they want to do. They might not be famous and have the paparazzi around, but they are the actors who we're constantly bringing in, that when I'm interviewing an assistant or interviewing someone or having an informational meeting with someone who wants to go into casting, and I say, who are your favorite actors? And they drop a name that I'm not expecting them to drop. It's so refreshing. It's like, oh, this is a casting director. This is someone who wants to be in casting. And not to say that like if you drop like a Meryl Streep or Viola Davis, that's a problem. I'm not saying that at all. But again, there's there and then going above, right? Because at the end of the day, we're not the ones that are going to be booking Viola Davis. We'll put them on a list, but we're not the ones to send an agent the deal memo for Viola Davis. So our job is to know whoever plays that mom or whoever plays the best friend or whoever plays the best friend's girlfriend. That's our job. And so knowledge of that actor, it's evolving, right? Because new actors come and new and older actors go. So it's an evolving thing. And that's why it's like the casting director brain. I thought I had a really great memory and I still do, but now it's filled with actors, So like my mom will be like, oh, what did you have for lunch yesterday? And I'd be like, did I have lunch yesterday? Like, you just forget, like, because it's just filled with so many actors that sometimes I forget. When you said, am I billed Erica Hart? I'm like, am I? So yeah, just knowledge of actors is key. Knowledge of actors is that's always going to be something that will impress somebody on an interview if you're going into casting. Just bringing up some actor that like regular people don't know. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah. 100%. Erica is super smart and she knows all the things.
I know nothing.
Erica.
And yeah, and that's true. Like I feel like when you're like, yeah, I just saw, it's also like seeing the current, like being like, I just watched this new show. I just watched this new, like shows that you're paying attention and that you're like in it, Mm-hmm. Because a lot of this industry is like, oh, what's kind of the next new thing, Mm-hmm. And you're like, oh, the friend in this, like you may not know, but the friend in the thing you just saw probably just booked the next Star Wars movie or the next, you know what I mean? So like, it's like paying attention to everybody is really key. So kind of where people are at.
And like, I started off casting student films, and one of the first student films I cast had Katie Lee Hill in it. And like, I have been working with Katie, like for the past 8, more than that, like 10, 12 years, I've been seeing Katie Lee Hill, and she was just in like the SpongeBob, like Nickelodeon musical thing, So like, that's important, is just to be like, oh, I remember this person, I'm going to bring them in for that. And then boom, here they are.
Yeah. Like one of the, I used to, like I mentioned, I used to work at the School of Visual Arts. And one of the things we used to do there was bring in actors to work in like film classes. And like they would do student films, they also come into classes, work with the students on like their writing and scene work and stuff. And one of the actors that I used to book all the time for that, Cameron Johnson, he's a regular on Batwoman now. Mm-hmm. I'm like, look at you go. I'm so proud of him. He's the best.
He is the best.
He knows who he is. He's wonderful. He's a sweetheart too.
My absolute.
But yeah, like, and that was what, 5 years ago? Like not that long ago, 4 years ago? Like it wasn't that long ago. And then it's like, so, going from like, doing your thing, but also like, hey, making, a little bit of pocket change, doing classes to being like a series regular and being in like magazines and stuff, you know?
Speaking of classes,
Yes.
I know that that sometimes you all will teach classes, and or you may have suggestions for people who might want to take a class from either of you, or places for them to look. And then I promise we're wrapping up. I just wanted to plug you, like.
Well, yeah, I think what Destiny said about the Google. I think the Google is a good situation, but also, you want to do your research too. You want to talk to other actors, other people who have taken class, and because sometimes these things cost money, and you want to spend your money wisely. So definitely, talking to each other. Hey, I saw you took this class. What did you get out of it? Or things like that. But definitely start with, whatever's in your area, and then go see those reviews and see what works.
Yeah. And I'm more likely to, like, if someone asks me, like, refer them to Google and their friends in the same way, because like I usually don't teach that often. I might do like a guest spot in like somebody's like, university class, but I actually don't teach very often. So, so I would, I like, there are certain acting teachers that like, so like, they're usually kind of expensive, but there are certain acting teachers who'll be like, oh yeah, this person, like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But like, if it's like very specific, like, oh, you got to prepare for this thing, there's like kind of like a handful of like pretty expensive but really great acting teachers that I might like send you to. But in general, I think that my experience is that like other actors are often going to give you a better idea of like how good a class is because they've actually taken it.
Yeah. Thank you, ladies, so much for joining us this evening. Thank you all for tuning in. Again, my name is Alexis Sims. I am sitting with Destiny Lilly and Erica Hart, both from CSA. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you tomorrow and next week.
Stay safe.